Poached pears with raisins and Turkish dried apricots. This is one of my favorite desserts. All of the sweetness in the recipe comes from dried fruits, so you're getting vitamins, minerals, fiber, and antioxidants while you satisfy your sweet tooth without refined sugar. What you need for this recipe is 6 medium pears, about 3 to 3.5 pounds of pears max. You'll need about 1/2 cup of toasted almonds, walnuts, or pecans for garnish. I started with raw nuts and I put them on a dry baking sheet in a 325-degree oven for about 15 to 18 minutes until they were lightly crisped. And you can leave them whole, or just before serving you can coarsely chop them to sprinkle on the pears. You'll need 1/3 to 1/2 cup of raisins and 1/3 to 1/2 cup of Turkish dried apricots. These are darker dried apricots because they don't contain any sulfites. Turkish dried apricots are actually sweeter than regular American-grown dried apricots, and you can find them in health food stores everywhere. You'll need 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, apple pie spice, pumpkin pie spice, or whole or ground anise seed, and a tablespoon of arrowroot, plus 1 1/3 cups of water. Let's get started. For the dried apricots, you'll need to cut them into small pieces. I like to use kitchen shears. I find they work so much better than a knife for dried fruit. Just cut them into thin slices, and that way they'll spread evenly throughout the dish. The next step is to sprinkle the dried apricots and the raisins into the pan. You'll need a 12 to 13 inch or even 14 inch skillet. If you don't have that, divide the dried fruits between 2 different skillets so there's plenty of room for the pears. The next step is to peel the pears and scoop out the cores, and I'll show you how to do that. Now that our pears are peeled, we're ready to start cutting them and coring them. Take each pear and cut it in half lengthwise, like this. Then what you do is scoop out the seed center. You can use a melon baller like this to scoop out the seed center. And you can either leave the stem on or take it off. If you have any bruised pieces, take your melon baller and just scoop that off. You can also scoop off that end of the blossom right there. The other way to do this, if you don't have a melon baller, you can take a grapefruit spoon or a teaspoon like this, or like this, and scoop around that seed center. And then make sure to take off that little rough blossom end right here. And you can also trim it a little bit on the end like that. The next step is to put the pears cut side down on top of the dried fruit. If you're using 2 pans, make sure that you divide the dried fruit and the pears evenly among the 2 pans. Make sure that the pears you're using are ripe but still firm. You don't want them mushy, but you don't want them rock hard. Now, you can see the pears are in the pan. They're not overlapping. They look absolutely beautiful. Now we'll sprinkle on our spice. And it's important to put the spice on top so that it doesn't burn on the bottom. And we'll add a cup of our water to the pan. We're going to leave 1/3 cup of water aside and our tablespoon of arrowroot. And after the pears have cooked, what we'll do is we'll scoop the pears onto a platter, and then we'll thicken the pan juices with arrowroot. And then we'll have a really nice, really beautiful sauce to spoon over the pears at the end. And then we'll garnish with the nuts. So we'll cover it, bring it to boil on high or medium high. And once the pan comes to boil, turn the heat to medium and set a timer for 20 minutes. Then check the pears to see when they're fork tender. There's no need to stir at all during cooking, so this is a great recipe to get started, and then you can go on to another recipe. Okay, let's check the pears. They're fork tender, so now we'll pull them off the burner for a minute. Scoop the pears onto the platter. And you want to have a nice wide spatula. And you can either do them cut side down or cut side up. I like to do them cut side down. You can leave as much of the dried fruit in the pan as possible at this point. Okay, the next step, we'll put the pears aside, and we're going to add our arrowroot to the reserved water. Stir to dissolve. You can turn the heat up to high. Or medium high. Add your arrowroot mixture to the pan and then stir to thicken. If you have a heat-proof silicone spatula, you can use that. Otherwise, I recommend a wooden spoon. So just stir gently to thicken, and if your sauce looks too thick, you can add a little bit more water. What you want is a nice, thick, viscous sauce and something you can spoon over the fruit. Okay, our sauce is ready, and now we'll spoon it over the fruit. Sprinkle on some chopped walnuts. You can chop them or just crumble them in your hands, and they'll be ready to serve. For a fancier presentation, you could serve a scoop of vanilla ice cream or non-dairy frozen dessert over each serving of pears. They're ready to go.